Good morning, everyone. How are we all doing?
Right.
Good. I can't believe we're not on Zoom. This is so bloody good. I am so sick of Zoom and Teams meetings. It's just a delight to be able to be here with you all today and have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the crazy thing we're building in Canterbury and how we're working to try and think about delivering better healthcare experiences for all of us. And so, after 20 years at Microsoft, I decided to go and do a little startup. And I was pretty busy at Microsoft, spent many hours a week flying, working, doing things. But boy, I have a whole new level of respect for startups and founders and the innovators like you in this room. I just am learning thick and fast at how much of a grind it is when you don't have a whole lot of supporting infrastructure around you. And it's hugely inspiring to have an opportunity to speak with many of you, but I now get more than ever better the challenges that many of us innovators go through every day. And one of the things that has inspired me about being back in Christchurch is just what an amazing amount of innovation that's going on down here. And it's just an incredible, great thing to be part of your community, to be part of this community, and hopefully to continue to make Canterbury Tech a lot bigger and better. Now, I was going to do a talk about making health better, and I'm still going to do that. But how many of you are from the health sector? So there's a few of you, and a few of you will find this a bit banal and a bit boring and a bit simplified. But for those of you who are not, I suspect that for many of you, the healthcare system is probably a little bit like this black bag. And you don't really know how it works. You partake in it, you end up being the integrator in it, you look after your family, your loved ones, and we've all had someone go through the system. And in general, you'll get frustrated and surprised that the healthcare system doesn't really work that well together. And fundamentally, the way that I tend to describe the healthcare system is a bit like a piece of pottery. We think it's well designed, we think it's well integrated, but in reality, it goes into this big black box, it sits there, and if you really want to get an appreciation of how the healthcare system works, sorry for my health and safety demonstration, it sort of looks a bit... What's in this bag is really kind of the healthcare system and what we expect for it to be. This little piece represents your GP office. This little piece may represent the hospital. This little piece may represent the private hospital. And this might be your physiotherapist organisation and so forth. And as you can imagine, in healthcare, what most of us expect to work together doesn't really work together because the pieces don't fit. And what we're focused on at Aceso Health is trying to help these pieces of the healthcare system work better together so that we can make the system whole, and so you don't have to be the person that is the glue in the system. So we take a strong view, and I had to kind of find an analogy for this broken pottery on stage today. And the best way I can correlate this for all of us is the ancient art of Kintsugi, a Japanese art where we take broken pottery and beautifully mend that together again using gold and platinum or silver to be able to really create new forms of art that hopefully take the broken form and put it back together again in a beautiful way. Now, I'm probably being a little overly dramatic, but healthcare isn't as broken as you think. And in fact, the Canterbury healthcare system that we've got, we can be incredibly proud of. A lot of work has gone in to try and bring the data together, bring the processes together and be able to make that happen. But although we're lucky in Canterbury, the opportunity for us in the more broader context of the healthcare system represents significant opportunity. And that's kind of how we're going about it and why we're focused on doing this work in New Zealand, Australia, and pushing into Southeast Asia, a market very dear to my heart. But as you can see, if we can fuse that beautiful pottery together, then we have an incredible opportunity to create new healthcare systems that we can all be proud of. And that's what we're focused on at Aceso, and the team works every day to do that. So we're going to call this Kintsugi for health. Taking these broken shards, and bringing them back together again. And when I describe the health system like broken pottery, these are the reasons why. Fragmented service delivery. Now, this is the fundamental challenge that we all have in healthcare. I know many of you will have gone to your GP and you'll have been referred for a radiology appointment, and you get a piece of paper, it might be printed out or it might be electronically available, but you're expected to call the radiology group, you're expected to book an appointment with them, you're expected to finish all the handoffs at each part of the juncture. We are asking patients to be the integrators of the healthcare system rather than the healthcare system integrating around you. And this also means that not everybody in health has the same idea of you at that point in time and how that impacts your care journey. And so this fragmented service delivery is a major challenge in this Kintsugi form for health, and how do we bring it back together? Everybody has shards of patient information. Again, Canterbury's in a much better place. We have things like Health One and Health Connect South where we do get some aggregation of the health record, but most healthcare systems do not. And therein lies the opportunity. But every part of the healthcare system knows a little bit about you, but doesn't really have the context. And so when you're sitting there with your aging father who might be sick, and you're sitting in the hospital explaining the condition for the third or fourth time to the next clinician, it gets deeply frustrating. And although that may never go away, because people may not read the integrated care record, it does present an opportunity for us to bring that data together. It's incredibly expensive with high overheads. Now, I spoke to you about the radiology example, but it's not unusual in a radiology group like that, and some of our customers in Australia, they'll have a call centre of 100 to 120 people. Those 100 to 120 people are just answering phones all day, making appointments for you. Now, we wonder why healthcare is expensive. There's a lot of administrative overhead to try and make all these broken parts come together. And that is one example of how we can actually start having a broader-based impact on how that happens. And it's difficult to make the pieces work together, and I think that's pretty obvious. We can see that in our own experiences today. But the data is also incredibly distributed. So there is no single source of truth. You don't have access to your whole record. You can't see your record and see what the whole healthcare system has about you. It's distributed into hundreds of little shards. So how do we bring that data back together again and put you as the custodian of your family's health records, or you as an individual being the keeper of your records and supporting the interactions with your clinicians in a privacy-controlled manner? These are the important things that we need to get to be able to make that happen. Now, for those of you who don't come from health, for me, I like to simplify everything down to a few basic things. But there are three things that are consistent in health to me. There's a lot more than this, but they're very consistent across systems. It's tasks, resources, and inputs. Tasks are generally done by letters, orders, and appointments. Resources are all the people and the rooms and the equipment that exist in the healthcare system. And the inputs and the medicines, the devices, the implants. Now, I'm oversimplifying this, but I want to give you a set of constraints that when you think about it as a software designer and a software builder and so forth, it doesn't matter where you go in the world, these things are common sense. But we don't tie the process of this in a distributed healthcare system together very well. And so how do we make that happen? And there's one other thing that healthcare loves doing. And being an old industry and a mature industry, it has lots of ways of doing things. In a certain extent, whenever my lawyer writes me letters still and says, hey, this is what we've done for you today, this is how much it's going to cost, here is the invoice. This is kind of old school business, and I always say, why don't you send me an email? Why don't you send me something electronic? Why don't you just do it in a normal way rather than sending a letter, or now sending the PDF of the letter and sending it to me? And my lawyer behaves this way, but healthcare behaves this way too. And it's really funny that the very thing that they have is the art of writing letters. All right? Healthcare is driven by the art of writing letters. How many of you have had a letter from the DHB anywhere in New Zealand for an appointment, and you get told Friday, 3:30 in the afternoon, you've got an appointment, turn up? And it comes by post. Now, in our household, we've only been back 5 years. We've had 2 of those letters arrive. 2 of them have arrived after the appointment date. Now, that's not a great result, but I suspect that happens more. I don't think it's normal, but I think it's just probably happened to us just to frustrate me and get me even more angry about what we can do about it. But the key thing about that is it's completely inflexible. And so all of a sudden you get this letter, it's Thursday, and you've got to turn up at Friday at 3:30. You've got to reschedule your whole diary to get to that appointment. But what do you think most people do? In that situation, I think most people do a do not attend, right? And they do not attend, and what does it do? It takes the very limited capacity we have in the healthcare system, and it pushes it out, and it wastes people's time, it wastes clinicians' time, it wastes the valuable resources that we have in health. And so we think you can do a lot better than this, and when you look at healthcare, these are the kinds of things that you see. Ordering diagnostics, forms that you tick, and you write on, and you scribble on, and you give to the patient, and so forth. Now, it's not as bad as this in Canterbury, but it's, trust me, around New Zealand, this is still very common, and if you go to Australia, most of these are Australian forms, so we can make jokes about them, but there's a couple of New Zealand ones in here too. River Radiology are ordering that, referral for imaging services. So this is how these orders get placed. If you're ordering labs, doctors love ticking, signing, writing things, scribbling on things, making things happen. These then get sent sometimes electronically, sometimes just by courier, or most commonly by fax machine. And even though we're banning the fax in New Zealand, the fax is a very big, important, high-tech device that we still use. And these are the referrals and appointments. So I didn't do a letter from New Zealand, but this is how the NHS, the very innovative NHS, does it in the UK. There's a sample of a physician referral letter in the US, and there's a cancer care in Canada doing referrals and appointments in the way that they do it. So healthcare, of course, is a very innovative business and does spend a lot of money on innovation and technology. But generally speaking, a lot of the technology innovation that we've seen in health looks more like this. We take a nice paper-based form and we talk to the clinicians about what they need in their application, and what we get is a nice electronic design form that then becomes the electronic instantiation of the process that we've still got. So we don't refine and redesign the process problem, but we spend all the time focusing on trying to implement the process that we love and understand today, because how dare you change the very thing that works. And so it's not all as bad as this, and I'm probably stretching the truth a little bit, but there's many applications that we see that are just replicating the process problems of the past and implementing them in the future. And so we have to think differently about how we do that. And I think you as individuals, as patients, as caregivers of family, you all deserve better in the way that we do that stuff. So when we look at the patient experience journey, and it's really about putting the patient at the center of everything we do, our healthcare systems have to think about what those patient care journeys look like. And how do we make sure that those processes flow right across the system, and that we enable the digital hotspots to take that pain away at every part of the corner of the healthcare system. And in that, we need to understand the patient journey and the mapping associated with that, and redesign and manage our processes to do this. And in many cases, this requires a redesign of the process problems in health. Right? So if you want to ensure that you streamline the operations of healthcare, that we coordinate across organisational boundaries, that we make processes span across organisational boundaries, and this is really the important one. A hospital can do a great job of fixing the systems inside the house, but when they want to interact with the systems outside the house, how do we make a process span? And if you laid out a patient journey across multiple parts, how do we ensure that as we put this patient on this journey across these islands, the information for each part of the care team is updated so they can get a single view of that person and understand that they're meeting their compliance goals, that their treatment is working and effective, and they're getting followed up. We've got to stop people falling through the cracks, and we've got to stop people from getting lost in the system just through complexity. And whether we talk about providing equitable access to care to the marginalised communities in New Zealand that don't have adequate access to care, or just people falling through the cracks and not being able to get access to parts of their care because they're confused, if we can do a better job of that, then I think we can make a big difference in how we view the world and how we make it happen. So at Aceso, we're focused on this journey. Call it our Kintsugi journey, for want of a better word, but it's about delivering a healthcare system we can all be proud of. It's about making health better. We're not saying it's broken, but we think we can just do more to make it better. And it's an ongoing commitment to improvement and an ongoing commitment to partnering with healthcare systems to be able to make that happen. So we want to move from patients that must contact call centres, which is by and large how it happens today, patient questionnaires that are emailed or physically sent. It's difficult to change appointments. Patients get frustrated. They don't turn up to their appointments. They waste valuable resources in the healthcare system, to a model where fundamentally patients can book online, patients can change their appointments, they can pay for their care online or understand what care is available to them. They can see their records and results no matter where they are across the system. They can see the doctor virtually or physically, and all of this can happen in an integrated way. And so that's the journey that we're on. Trying to build this is not easy, and so we're thinking about this in different ways, but fundamentally what we're doing is we're starting at the edge and working towards the centre. So we believe that 70% of care happens with your GP, with your radiologist, with your lab company. If we can sort those processes out to be more effective, then as we integrate those, as we move into the hospitals and private hospital care levels and so forth, we're able to do a better job of helping those systems also integrate with the greater last mile. And so we're kind of flipping it up. Rather than trying to say we're going to do this centrally, we're just coming up from the bottom and being able to make that happen. And there's real logic to that, but fundamentally that's where a lot of the patient interactions happen, so that's kind of how we focus on the journey. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but fundamentally we're delivering products to improve care. At the outset, there's Aceso Pinga, which is our broad-based system for building national health systems that can manage and coordinate care like this. Aceso SnapScan is a product specifically designed for radiology to take the complex booking process of radiology groups, and it is complex because it's not just about a 15-minute slot with your GP. Do I have the room? Do I have the equipment? Do I have the right sonographer? Do I have the right tech? Can I make those slots available, and how do I make them bookable? So we take the complexity of all the myriad variables in healthcare and optimize those in software so that when you have to get an ultrasound and an x-ray and you want to book it, we'll optimize the calendar and appointment slots so you can get those two together, so you don't have to go and get an x-ray one day and an ultrasound the following week because availability wasn't there. And so we use software to optimize and build those rules to make the patient experience better. We're doing a bunch of things in virtual health and analytics, but fundamentally it's the process problems that we're going after in health to improve care. And so Pinga is this electronic health record system that runs national health systems, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So the way we think about the healthcare system, and I think it's important, is health isn't just one part. It's not just your DHB, it's not just your primary care physician, your allied health, or your pharmacy or specialists. There's hundreds of actors in this system. How do you bring those together? And we believe that what we can do is take something like Pinga, integrate with all the existing systems that healthcare has, and bring that together so that we can provide a single source of truth, while the data can stay in place with the clinicians. So you can't muck with the way that in the workflows that doctors might want to work in their GP practice or in their physiotherapy practice or in the hospital. We don't replace those systems, but we bring the data together so we can enable a whole bunch of new functionality underneath in a consistent way to drive that last mile experience, but also to ensure that each clinician on the journey of that patient can see where that patient is at. So both sides can understand each other as part of the equation. So our heritage of Pinga is really based on work our team did in North Macedonia and Serbia. We manage over 10 million patients there now every single day. The entire healthcare system and the process flow for those two countries run through us. Now that's great because it means every referral, every booking, every medication is dispensed and managed and flows through our system. So at any point in time, you can see a view of the entire healthcare system in real time and see the volume of data that's going on. That's great, but you couldn't do this in New Zealand easily. If you said to the ministry, that's what you should do, they wouldn't be able to tell all the DHBs that's what they should do, and all the primary care organisations that's what they should do. And the same in Australia. We've got distributed decision making, we've got decentralised planning, decentralised funding, so you have to think differently about doing it. That is the end game you want, but how do you achieve that end game? And that's by working from the edge to the centre. Royal Far West uses our system to manage relatively complex children at risk program. So Royal Far West particularly looks after children in foster families, children suffering from violence, children that have been fostered and so forth, and provides wraparound programs and management for them. And it requires clinical psychology, doctors, educators, therapists, and so forth to come together to improve the care pathway of the individual. And so our system manages the referrals, the bookings, the appointments, the family, the permissioning model around this to ensure that people are on that journey and are managed extensively through that. And then earlier this year, we went live with Te Ora Compass in Wellington, completely redesigning about 65 of their existing healthcare applications that didn't really talk to each other to a single integrated view of about 500,000 citizens in the Wellington region to be able to be managed through our Pinga platform and to manage the practices and the data and so forth. And that enables you to do powerful things, particularly in relation to monitoring COVID or doing those kinds of things, because very quickly you can build this capability using that single source of truth. In radiology, we're also doing some really cool work, and you'll see some cool new work going live with a large radiology group in the South Island very shortly. But we've got customers like IMED, which is the second largest radiology group in the world by number of clinics. We've got over 200 sites live, and you can book your MRI, your CT scan, your X-ray or ultrasound directly online. Your referrer, rather than writing a letter, can choose the study that they want for you, and the moment you leave the clinic, you'll get a text message going, "Thanks for visiting Dr. Marjorie today. She has referred you for an MRI. Click here," and automatically you can just choose the time and location that suits you based on the GPS location of that. It changes the way that you think about being the integrator to just being able to make the decisions that support you in your life. And that's fundamentally what it's about. We do the same thing with Mercy Radiology, Dr. Jones and Partners, and we added another 2 customers during COVID. And I just find it amazing that during COVID, we can go and do deals in Australia with customers we've never seen before, make them go live, and get them functional and starting to use that stuff in the middle of a pandemic. And I think that for me was probably the most inspirational moment over the last 6 months. I thought, oh, here we go. I'm 6 months in, now we've got COVID. What are we going to do about this business? It's going to get really, really tough. But customers responded and said, hey, no, we can do this. We can still build and deliver capability. We still want to move the market forward. We can't stop what we're doing. We're going to go with you and do this. And for someone who's usually been on a plane and visited people and done those things, I just find it awesome that we can still do work in COVID with Teams and Zoom, even though I'd much rather prefer to be in this room with you guys all today to be able to make that happen. COVID also brought us another number of customers in the virtual health space, and we thought about a lot of different things that we could do for COVID, but one of the things that we had in Pinga was this virtual health module, and we realised that clinics and practices in New Zealand wanted to build branded experiences that didn't have appointments but could take payment, could take enrolment, and be able to do that. And so we've gone live now with both Tamaki Health and Green Cross and built their entire virtual health platform and their booking engines so you can do this kind of work. Now this is pretty cool because I had my little boy Henry He's 8, and he wakes up one day, he's got a rash all over himself, and I said, look, I don't know what to do with this. I want to take you to the doctor, but if your experience with your GP, enrolled GP, is anything like mine, I sort of call them and I go, yep, we can see you in 3 or 4 days. They are busy. And all I wanted really was a prescription or a doctor to have a look at this. So that night at 5 o'clock, I get on the computer. I said, well, I probably should use one of my customers' services and see what it's like and really prove it out. And so I booked the appointment at 5 o'clock. I had an appointment at 5:20. Henry's talking over the computer with the doctor. We pull the webcam out, look at his condition. Doctor decides what wants to do. Thank you very much. 3 seconds later, I get an SMS. Thanks for visiting the doctor today. Here's your prescription. I click on the prescription. It says, where would you like to pick it up? We know you're in Hoka. Would you like to pick it up in Rangiora? Is your closest pharmacy? Yep, I said, I'll pick it up at Stan's Pharmacy. And by 6 o'clock, we had all of it in our hands. And I never left my house until I went and picked up the drugs. Now, that's a pretty cool experience end to end, and that cost me nothing because children under 14 are free. So when we talk about equity and access and trying to improve the patient journey, that's the kind of redesign of the processes that we have to work on and how we make that happen. And I'm pretty excited that there's a lot of different healthcare innovation going on across the country right now. There's a great deal of companies focused on making health better, not just us. And it's that collaboration and that working together to try and solve these things that makes it happen. We don't do the e-prescription service. That's another company, but we work together to bring healthcare together to make it work better. And it's a delightful experience. And I encourage you, if you want to try either of those services to see what it's like to get an end-to-end experience that's integrated without you having to not be able to visit your doctor or can't get into your practice. So ultimately, this is about healing through bringing it together and trying to make the healthcare system work. At Aceso, we're driven by a single purpose, which is really about improving the healthcare experience for patients and providers. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, is make the transactional processes across the healthcare system not be moments in time, but be transactions that can end in completions and processes that are joined together and that stitch that journey together. And it's not an easy problem. There's a lot of work to do. We're certainly not anywhere near solving it, but bit by bit we take our time and our team works hard to try and make it happen. But ultimately, we measure everything against, are we improving the healthcare experience for a patient or a provider, or are we detracting from it? And we can only really move forward on where we're making a difference and improving it. And the ability to do this from Canterbury, the ability to do this from Christchurch, but sell into Singapore, sell into Australia, and do this all during lockdown while we can't get on planes is huge testament to the team and our ability to just work with our customers and share a vision that we will all want to make healthcare better. We're now a team distributed across Christchurch, Auckland, Wellington, Sydney, and Eastern Europe, in the country of North Macedonia, where a lot of our engineers are. This is a team of dedicated engineers that just do healthcare, but we couldn't do it without them because you need a lot of engineers to kind of build the software and complexity that we're doing. And over time, we'll be adding more people here as well to do the work in New Zealand and in Australia. But this is how we build from our pedigree and continue to innovate while we continue to push healthcare forward. So I'll stop there and say thank you very much for your time. I hope that was useful. I'm probably 10 minutes ahead of schedule, so I'm willing to take some questions and go from there. Cool.
Mike. And we do have some questions. That's good. First of all, thanks to Gabe for stepping up and coming on stage a bit earlier than anticipated. We're trying to get hold of Lena. Not sure what the issue has been there. Meanwhile, a few questions for Gabe. From Florian, how much pushback do you get for storing health data in the cloud? Data sovereignty issue. Question.
Look, I think most healthcare organisations have matured to the point that the option of I store it in the cloud or I store it under my desk at the hospital is no longer too much of a concerning question anymore. I think the cloud vendors themselves, like the Microsofts and the AWSs and so forth, are starting to build local data centres in each country to meet the regulatory requirements that happen. What we do is we store all our data in Australia East, and we do all the compliance testing and so forth that is expected by the Ministry of Health and the different providers. So we're not having that much pushback. If one of the things that I did change early on, and it was probably my lessons in my career from Microsoft, is, we used to have pricing that the cloud was a little bit more than on-premise, and so what people would do is we'll go, oh, well, we'll just go on-premise and we'll keep running our infrastructure and running our tin and doing all that kind of stuff. So very early on in our business, I said, right, I don't want to be dealing with IT departments and trying to support applications and be able to keep them live and running. So we flipped our pricing model to be cloud is cheaper than on-prem. You can have on-prem as an option for our infrastructure, but we'll give you the cloud service fully managed for less. And funnily enough, all the customer behavior and every contract just changed overnight. All of a sudden, they didn't care about where the data was hosted. They just went, oh, we'll have the cloud one, please. So I don't know if it was the pricing or whether it's the perception or whether it's just broad-based comfort with cloud computing now as being a way to get our cybersecurity posture correct. It's certainly been an interesting journey, one where we've played around with pricing models to figure out what's right. But if you're having this challenge in your own business, selling your products, I found that flip was very, very useful.
Thanks, Gabe. It's kind of related in a way. What have you had to do to cope with the New Zealand changes with the Privacy Act and other jurisdictions, of course, GDPR and others? How do you cope with that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we benefit from is because our software engineering is in Europe, we have to be GDPR compliant to supply to the governments over there. So out of the gate, we have to be very focused on engineering for privacy and GDPR. And GDPR has been a very, well, not draconian. It's a sensible approach, but it's quite a heavy-handed approach to being able to ensure that we can delete all the data about you if you wish to do so. GDPR also has far-reaching impacts across borders. So because we had to do the GDPR work, the New Zealand privacy legislation isn't really incompatible with that. And so we can meet the objectives and intent of this shifting privacy legislation quite well. At the end of the day, healthcare is about consent, and patients will consent into a system to be able to say, this is what you can and can't do with my data. Now, that's sometimes unfair, but not necessarily understood, but we have to collect all that information to ensure that those journeys can happen. But very rarely do you get patient pushback when they can book their appointments electronically, automatically after they've been to see a doctor without doing a ring around and muck around. Yeah.
And how about one from Ben Reed, who's worried about your bank balance? Bootstrapped or raised capital so far?
We're bootstrapped so far, and I'd certainly like to keep it bootstrapped. I think as we grow and bring on more people, I think there's some cash flow periods that will get a little bit tough. But right now we're holding the fort. So we're bootstrapped. It's exciting. We're kind of hanging on for our lives and trying to do our best. But the thing that drives us is, can we add more customers, and can we deliver those and make sure that we make their customers happy, which is ultimately their patients and providers. And if we do that, we think we can push through quite well. But yeah, it's quite different than having the Microsoft behind you say, go and invest here, go and invest there. But I'm enjoying it immensely because it's a pressure that certainly gets you up in the morning.
And one from Sean Fleming. With the move to digital and an ageing population, there's a reasonable percentage of patients are elderly who may not be tech savvy. How have you addressed this to ensure adoption of digital for these users, or that they have access in other ways?
I don't know how many of you have been to an aged care home lately and wandered around, but I think you'll find that they're getting quite digitally savvy. I think we underestimate the ageing in our community, and I think many of them are actually evolving quite quickly. My father's 79. Now, admittedly, he's had his son banging on him for over 30, 40 years, being a geek and saying, you've got to do it this way, do it that way. He doesn't take feedback very well. But he's very technically savvy to the point now he's got to the point of being able to rebuild his PC. And he's 80. So I think, yes, there is going to be 10, 20% of the population that may still struggle. But for them, the old way of doing things is not getting shut down, right? Digital is not an either-or option in this market. What we're trying to do is, can we move 80% of the people that want a digital interaction and give them services that meet their expectation and still service the other 20% in the way that they used to. But over time, I don't think we're going to have any barriers in making that happen. But next time, have a look around an aged care home if you're visiting one or visiting a loved one, and just count the number of iPads and people on computers and doing things and talking to their children and so forth. And I think you'll be surprised that the generational change that has happened far quicker than we ever thought.